Hi, Anna. And if one could say that their life is like a book that you can't stop reading, mine would be oxymoronic. Imagine a beautiful house with a white fence, the aroma of a barbecue, a dog, Buster, with a few bald patches here and there, and you get it, right? But deep down, beneath the surface, is the real story. And that is, well, my family, I suppose. There was Rachel, my older sister, the prim and proper one, the life of the stars. I was the worker bee. No one notices a worker bee. Ratch, that's what we call her in her dressing room. Blonde hair, a smile that could light a room, and the charm of a megastar. Ratch could wrap anyone around her little finger. Turn around and look at a new dress. Blink those big blues eyes, and bam, it's like it's made of gold. Meanwhile, I'd make do with leftovers if I was lucky. Except I'm not whining. We've got a roof over our heads, and I wear clothes. It's not like we live in a Dickens novel or anything. But let's face it, in a pageant of life, Ratch is always the winner. Rachel. Oh, she was living the dream. Away at some elite college where the lawns were manicured and the buildings had ivy crawling up the walls, it was like the red carpet had been rolled out for her and everyone was there cheering her on. But the party was over when it was my turn to talk. Money's a little tight, Anna, Mom said carefully. Dad sat at the head of that wobbly kitchen table, scratching his neck anxiously. Mom stirred her coffee like it held all the answers. You know, maybe it's time to start looking for a job, Dad suggested as the easy fix, like it was just that simple. I felt like they were talking in code. Instead of just coming right out and saying I couldn't afford my dreams, they'd talk around it until they were blue in the face. And then, just like that, not even 18 yet, I found out school wasn't a real option. But that wouldn't stop me. My plan was simple, daring, but respectful. So here's the plan. I'd work hard, save every penny, and claw my way into that courtroom with Esquire scribbled at the end of my name. The jobs I took weren't what you'd call prestigious. By day, it was coffee in one hand, dodging flying pastry crumbs like they were landmines. And by night, it was soap and suds from dishes in a rundown diner that had seen better days. You're the hardest worker here, Emily bragged while we leaned against the kitchen counters and let our laughter echo off the walls. Trish, who just finished tuning her bass guitar before tomorrow's concert with her band, laughed and nodded. Yeah, if anyone can do it, it's you. Their words were my warm blanket, an encouraging hand pushing me forward. Everything was going as planned, just a bit slower. Oh well, what's life without its little surprises? Then I woke up one day feeling like a semi had a go at me. It wasn't just the flu. In fact, it was worse. Long story short, one dreadful morning, I woke up in the hospital with bills the size of an encyclopedia stacked up next to my pillow. Miss Anna, this isn't nearly enough, the lady from the bills department sang joyfully as a coroner. The insurance has some policies I'm not sure you completely grasp. The bill she slid across the table was soaking up my lifetime savings. How come? I whimpered in disbelief. As charming as a wrecking ball tearing down the house, the full charming nature of America showed its real colors to me that day. Well, America's insurance office undoubtedly had my number. She smiled sympathetically at me and told me to contact their center in case payments are troubling me. I couldn't have felt ghostlier than a specter haunting to pay out someone else's debts. It's not me personally, sugar, it's the system. She sighed and handed me back the credit card. It can't be just me who felt the personal assault. The air was icy and the apartment was colder than a regular morning would allow. There go the textbooks. I flipped through another how-to textbook on law. 3 dreams behind the corner, condensed into one burrow of a living room. What's next? Trisha's voice was the first to break the silence, laden with doubt. Honestly, I did not have a clue. My mind was a storm cloud of questions that led nowhere. It is returning to ground zero, but for some reason, it seemed to be much rougher than before. I suppose I will have to start again. I finally replied, attempting to make it sound like a good plan, but I knew she did not believe it. Trish and Emily shared a look of understanding. Yeah, I get it. Our place is too cramped. The bitterness of the words hung between me and my phone, and, in vain, Mom tried to sweeten the pill she was asking me to swallow. After some coaxing, Dad took the receiver and talked to me for a minute, trying to sweeten the bitter medicine. Then I handed the phone back to Mom, and Dad went to bed. Sitting on that hard black bench, surrounded by people bustling about, people with a home to return to, I couldn't shake the feeling of being lost even. Rachel was also too busy to talk for a moment. Family, I thought miserably. Some of the people at the bus stop heard the ending of my conversation and started whispering bitterly about family. The man sitting next to me, a worn jacket thrown over his back and a 5 o'clock shadow, snorted and shook his head in understanding. Family, he muttered. He was right. I didn't feel like talking to him, but there was a strange comfort in hearing the words from someone else's mouth. Hey, don't worry about it. You look like a fighter. He grinned and crumpled the paper bag he was holding in his other hand. I managed a weak smile. Got any tips for sleeping on these ones? I indicated the bench, my voice tinted with humor at which I didn't feel. The man considered the bench and then me, squinting at me as if to size me up. The buses run all night. End to end, you get to go back. Much safer than a rip-off, I'll tell ya. He shrugged, his words hanging in the air above me. My phone buzzed, warning me that my battery was low. Great, just great. The bus hissed in front of us, and its doors yawned open like a portal to any place other than here. The guy boarded, taking a seat among the listless faces of late-night regulars. I stood there for a moment, my fingers tight around bus fare. I wasn't ready yet to resume the cycle of meaningless rotations. With a deep breath, I grabbed my suitcase and walked away, wheels making an echo on the sidewalk. The street lights flickered uncertainly above, projecting a jerky light on my feet below. In that unsteady glow, I made a promise, silent but firm. This isn't the end of my story. I clung to that like a mantra as I walked determinedly into the night. Each step was an act of rebellion, each breath a reminder to myself that I would pull myself from the pit I fell into. "Come on, kid," crackled Aunt Marlene's voice from the other end of the phone, and I felt myself being dragged out of the morass of my thoughts. Hearing her gruff voice over the phone never felt so comforting. When I arrived on her stoop, Aunt Marlene wasted no time on pleasantries. "You look like shit," she observed, pushing me gently inside. I spent the following days in her guest room, trying to pick up the pieces of what was left of me. She didn't ask for details. We never were a family that had cozy heart-to-hearts. But I could tell she was expecting me to share. And then, as we sat at the cluttered kitchen table of marred particles with seemingly steel-hard, resilient plants all around, she placed her mug on the table's boisterous center and focused those hell-dry eyes shining of hers to bore into my soul. "What do you want, Anna?" It was as if I was on one of those wearisome makeover shows, The Big Reveal. But I was tired to pretend. "I want to be a lawyer, Aunt Marlene." I'm a burnt-out voice that I couldn't control my desperate sob. She nodded as if she already knew. "Then it's settled," she said, drumming her fingers on the table, making her noise mingle with the wall clock's ticking. "I will pay for you to go to university." My heart skipped a pump as if it had been jolted with electricity. "Are you serious?" I blurted, but she raised a single finger, returning my excitement with her condition. "I want you to keep your grades up," Marlene said steadfastly. Her eyes seemed to hope I could do it. I smiled hard. "Of course, I won't blow my money on bingo and whiskey after all," she added with a chuckle. I jumped up and enveloped my aunt in a tight hug. The words "thank you" got stuck in between us. "Now, none of that mushy stuff. Marlene grumbled, but her back gave me a reassuring pat. "You're going to work for me part-time. I need more help than I like to admit." "What kind of work?" I was ready to take on anything. "The kind that needs doing," she said vaguely, shooing me off. "We start with that jungle you call a hairdo, and tomorrow we do the yard work." I laughed wholeheartedly, a sound I had not heard from myself in a while. "Deal." "It's not because I'm nice," Marlene warned. "You slack off and the deal's over." I shook my head. "Don't worry." She studied me for a moment, then grinned. "Good. Now help me with these damned plants. They have a social life bigger than mine." The rest of the day was covered in soil, a bunch of pruning and watering, and yet the dirt never felt so good on my hands. Aunt Marlene was making me work for every penny she was throwing my way, but that was okay. It wasn't a day at the beach being a poor college student. Aunt Marlene came in clutch, but keeping the books and bills in the air was like juggling knives. Slip up once, and it may cut deep. I'd blink open in the mornings after cramming civil procedure, an alarm buzzing like a bee in a jar, books spread like a buffet on the desk. I didn't want to dig in when the grumble in my stomach reminded me I was just a human that needed fuel. I'd make a beeline to the nearest food joint on campus, and there's Lily, the regular, behind the counter, giving me a knowing grin. "Double shot today?" she asked, noticing the long night ahead. "You know it. They get a greedy grin out of that tired mug." Hand me over a coffee and a sandwich, and she was worried. "You're going to burn out like this," she warned. "You can't burn out when you're already on fire, can you?" But in reality, I felt more like kindling than a blaze. Nights blurred together with flashcards and frayed nerves, every buzz of my phone a looming reminder of Aunt Marlene checking in on me or the bills I still hadn't paid. I always painted a rosier picture of my life for her than the reality I lived. But then, literally overnight, everything changed. Aunt Marlene fell sick, really sick, possibly even fatally. I find myself squeezing her hand in this too-quiet hospital room, unsure of how to feel or what to say. What kind of rock do you offer someone who's been your foundation as they crumble? On one of her visits, I tried to brighten the mood with the thought of scolding me when a time came when she resided. "You better not," she rasped, barely more than a whisper in a voice, the sparkle in her eyes still shining through the brightness now filling them once more. "Crumbs everywhere, wasn't there?" I murmured. This was a topic that never crossed its mind when she and I spoke. It was nearly a nudge, the elephant in the room collecting nothing words and pictures were likely to say. I was sitting there as she sat there to pass that ghostly spirit. I never felt the need to enter another examination room in her life. A lawyer was an ill-timed man with a comb-over and slippage of glasses. "She left me her house, Anna," he said. I felt as though his ghost peeked up behind me. Neither money had to be spoken of. The attorney shuffled the paper across the work. She had made sure enough of my student debts. "You have to work on the rest," he says, strokey. No, Marlene had made it evident. I would have to find a new direction on my own. I hate to admit that my throat constricted, but I had to know. Did she say anything else? His glasses adjusted, and he told me with a steady tone, "Just that she believed in you, and she'll haunt you if you give up." I laughed through the tears. Yeah, that was Aunt Marlene, all right. She wasn't just leaving behind I'd blink open in the mornings after cramming civil procedure, an alarm buzzing like a bee in a jar, books spread like a buffet on the desk. I didn't want to dig in when the grumble in my stomach reminded me I was just a human that needed fuel. I'd make a beeline to the nearest food joint on campus, and there's Lily, the regular, behind the counter, giving me a knowing grin. "Double shot today?" she asked, noticing the long night ahead. "You know it. They get a greedy grin out of that tired mug." Hand me over a coffee and a sandwich, and she was worried. "You're going to burn out like this," she warned. "You can't burn out when you're already on fire, can you?" But in reality, I felt more like kindling than a blaze. Nights blurred together with flashcards and frayed nerves, every buzz of my phone a looming reminder of Aunt Marlene checking in on me or the bills I still hadn't paid. I always painted a rosier picture of my life for her than the reality I lived. But then, literally overnight, everything changed. Aunt Marlene fell sick, really sick, possibly even fatally. I find myself squeezing her hand in this too-quiet hospital room, unsure of how to feel or what to say. What kind of rock do you offer someone who's been your foundation as they crumble? On one of her visits, I tried to brighten the mood with the thought of scolding me when a time came when she resided. "You better not," she rasped, barely more than a whisper in a voice, the sparkle in her eyes still shining through the brightness now filling them once more. "Crumbs everywhere, wasn't there?" I murmured. This was a topic that never crossed its mind when she and I spoke. It was nearly a nudge, the elephant in the room collecting nothing words and pictures were likely to say. I was sitting there as she sat there to pass that ghostly spirit. I never felt the need to enter another examination room in her life. A lawyer was an ill-timed man with a comb-over and slippage of glasses. "She left me her house, Anna," he said. I felt as though his ghost peeked up behind me. Neither money had to be spoken of. The attorney shuffled the paper across the work. She had made sure enough of my student debts. "You have to work on the rest," he says, strokey. No, Marlene had made it evident. I would have to find a new direction on my own. I hate to admit that my throat constricted, but I had to know. Did she say anything else? His glass, whenever they threw at me next, must have been uncomfortable for them. Think of the family. Mom softened her voice. "I see now I'm the only one who actually does care about this family." A silence fell between us, mucky and heavy as cotton. Rachel predictably broke the silence. "You can be such a—" She was speaking, but I was warning them to leave. As they shuffled out of the house with their burdened disbelief and entitlement, Dad turned on me a warning. "You'll regret this." I met his gaze bravely. "The only thing I'll regret is not changing the locks sooner." As the door closed behind them, the house grew silent and the fight drew to a close. No matter her genetics, I was going to live in Aunt Marlene's legacy, not auction it off to the highest claiming bidder in my bloodline. However, a different type of exhaustion was knocking at the door. The type of exhaustion that was in your bones. After driving to my house, I had just worked a double shift at the law firm. My only desire was a hot shower and my bed. After I key into the door, it did not open. "What the—" I said as I wrestled with the key. The door then pushed back, and I found Rachel on the other side of the door with the 3-year-old Maya on her hip with a smug smile on her face. "Changed the locks, Anna, surprise," she said, her voice jubilant. My eyes widened in confusion. "Hell, you did this. This is my house," I retorted, feeling as a concoction of rage and alarm moved in me. Not anymore. The aura in the room was denser than syrup. Maya had a series of innocent chuckles, seated on her chair, completely unaware of the adult commotion around her. The bile simmered in my voice on the literal bubbling point. "Watch me," I declared as my finger dialed Rachel. His smile began to fade. "You are bluffing," he stammered faintly as my phone was through. Dad's truck lurched forward in the driveway, Mom tailing him. They approached as if it were an intervention. "Anna, be normal," Mom wailed, her eyes welling up like the scene in a soap opera. "I'm way past normal," I barked bluntly. Dave leaned over me, trying an appeal. "Come on, Anna," he protested mildly. I shot the phone back at him. The record indicator mocked at us both, daring to challenge me. "Say that again to the phone, Dave, what you just said," I taunted him. His face blanched as the sirens tore through the air and the real authorities swept in. The cops went out of their car, professional faces that softened the moment they wrapped the scene. Dad's concerned voice went shaky, firming up with lies. "Officers, it's just a mistake," he trailed off. But robbing my house away from me was not an inconsequential family malfunction. And I made sure they knew that. Dad and Mom put on a good show as the officers questioned us, but the house was deeded in my name, courtesy of Aunt Marlene's will. "Can you prove you live here, ma'am?" asked one, and I remember thinking, better yet, I can prove I own it, as I pulled Aunt Marlene's will out of my briefcase. That single sheet of paper felt like a victory, a deep breath after holding my breath under the water far longer than Mina had. The thought that I handed over that damn car key felt like I was surrendering a part of my soul. They looked over it suspiciously, and their brows rose and fell in the way that only people closely examining paperwork can pull off. "Seems clear enough," said one, tucking the papers in his pocket. "Hand over the keys to Miss here, or we'll have to press charges for your breaking and entering and unlawful eviction." It was a struggle, but eventually Rachel cracked and handed over a bunch of keys. Mom and Dad went quickly, but Dave, gods, poor Dave, he disappeared inside his oversized coat, trying to make himself invisible. The police led 4 of them off the property, and Mom managed to shoot me a look that was pure magma. Too bad it was the law. Otherwise, people's sob stories would get everything. The door clicked behind them, a final arbitration on the argument, and I leaned my back against it. My hand shook with adrenaline like a hummingbird's wings. I walked to the kitchen on shaky legs, ready for a sip of that coffee as the desert craved rain. The whistling and boiling of the pot carried me back into my thoughts. The heavy click of the last lock seemed like the end of a bad joke. My house was as fortified as a fortress now, but still lacked that perfectistic perfection. Maybe it was high time I bought a big, nasty dog, I joked to myself. I was far from being a pet person, but imagining a drooling inode scaring off undesirable family visits made me smile. The following few weeks were Chester-like, quiet. Deprived of their incessant bustle on the other end of the line, silence seemed louder than words. No calls, suddenly even a lost text. Each and every sleepless night, I'd find myself surfing through Rachel's children's social media. She knew how to snap the most dramatic pictures, sad eyes and pouty red lips with a subtitle that could melt an orphan's heart. Little Timmy begging for a backyard to play in, and Maya's 3rd birthday party without Auntie Anna that always got a chuckle out of me. Did they think I had amnesia? Forget why I'd stayed away from the moment I finally put my foot down. The abject poverty of the past was the same as the desperate hours I'd known a decade ago. When I begged for more cash to fund my studying, they'd always spout that nonsense about teaching responsibility and tough love. Behind those words, though I still heard the slam of the door when I had nowhere to go, I remember feeling like the wind had been squeezed right out of me. That was their failing, but what happened from then until now? That's mine, something I did all on my own. Stacks of case files sat jumbled on my desk, hosts of other things that didn't care about mommy and daddy issues. My clients needed me, and that was all affirming. Occasionally, I'd sneak into my back porch for a neat bourbon, taking in the whole backyard they tried to snatch away from me. It was nice and quiet. I'd daydream about a guard dog with eyes that could make my parents think twice before stepping onto my property once a week. I bet I'd settle on a Rottweiler, something massive with a loud bark. My phone stayed silent. It's a limb I'm used to being without. As the sun blossomed into night and sleep began to claim me, I barely registered a thought of yes or twist open a house dog. This house, my house, all 4 solid walls. Maybe I'd get it. Maybe I wouldn't, but it wasn't a choice to think about. For once, a concept